came to my mind. What are the objectives of the United States defense strategy towards South Asia? Whether it was to combat terrorism as stipulated in US national documents, or whether it had or continued to have other implied intentions. This is what I hypothesized. To find out more, I devised a methodology, which was multifaceted, anthropological, and ethnographic. This was because I could not fully depend on documentary approach, since foreign policy and defense strategy are often confidential, and the materials that help formulate policy are constructivist. Therefore, my research began its inquiry with a combined positivistic and constructivist methodology. In this study, I intended to get views and opinions from relevant foreign policy officials, academics, experts, and journalists. To get the public citizen viewpoint, I did more than 50 short interviews in a manner of Gallup polls. Now, let me move on to the findings of my research. To elaborate my findings, I divided my focus into 4 parts. These are containment of Chinese power, strategic interest over resources and trade, establishing democracy and human rights, preventing nuclear war and interstate conflicts. First, the containment of Chinese power. The US defense strategy in Asia relates to their interest in the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean already contained a declared series of activities and strategic military standpoints. Here, what matters to US foreign policy and what happens in the Indian Ocean are major focus of the study. It is a huge program by the United States with a large sums of US state money continued into the future. The amount invested is so high and even cannot be estimated with a large military expenditure for the whole nation from Washington. At the same time, Chinese intervention was mooted and different interpretations were given on China's involvement in Asia. With reference to String of Pearls, it appears to China as an organized program for peaceful trade with Asia. But such is interpreted by US academics and policymakers, a network that can develop into a military strategy. In response to this interpretation, US strategy has developed a pivot to Asia during the administration of the President Obama. The objective of pivot to Asia was to strengthen US ties with Asia. This could be viewed as an effort to contain Chinese expansion and strengthen the US ties in Asia. While this situation prevails, the Republican candidate to the US presidential election 2016, Donald J. Trump, refers to China as their good friend. He more emphasized the need to develop more trade and economic relations with China. As for evidence, he pointed out the US investment in China rose from 19 billion in 2000 to 66 billion in 2007. This is one of the ambiguities in the US policy I have found out through my findings. Secondly, when it comes to resources and trade, the main interest of the United States was India and Pakistan. Both these countries have cheap labor, unlimited resources in manpower, geographical and material resources. As a superpower, any nation will look out for investments in resources and selling at profit in peaceful transactions. This was obviously the reason why US was interested in the whole of Asia. Although the declared objective of interfering into South Asian states was combating terrorism, the US has adopted development aid perspective as a new interfering method. Investments from the US was treated as development. Indeed, they gave considerable amount of aid depending on the level of poverty and the size of the sea coast. But South Asian developing countries are still lacking in science and technology, and prevailing in traditional technologies was the main issue. On this basis, the researcher in serendipity discovered that US is only interested in the wealth of Asia and trading with it. On the third, one characteristic of the US intervention in other countries has declared their interest to promote their values, democracy and human rights over the whole world. According to the UN Charter, it should be in honor of the sovereignty of other nation states. US has taken the position to intervene in countries where human rights were violated. There has been a few instances where US intervened even without the consent of the UN Security Council. When it comes to the cases on Sri Lanka and Nepal, the US got appreciation for their development strategy in Nepal. But some of the experts, academics and journalists who researchers interviewed criticized US stand on Sri Lanka by stating that US has implemented and is still implementing the policy of ambiguity. At the beginning stage of war, US supported Sri Lanka by extending military and training resources. But halfway, US stepped back towards in the termination of war in 2009. These are some of the issues that researchers faced regarding this point. Finally, as you all know, India and Pakistan, nuclear powers in South Asia. US was trying to convince them to join the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty during the administration of President Clinton and also within later administrations. But neither India nor Pakistan still signatories to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty or Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. This means that it is very difficult to get these countries rid from their traditional rivalries. Therefore, international community continues to believe that there is a risk of nuclear war in South Asia. However, US did not come into any distinct agreements regarding any limitation to nuclear proliferation. It is presumed that US intends to build a peaceful environment in South Asia. But sometimes it appears that US leaned more towards India than Pakistan by extending their political, economic, and military relations. In this way, US may promote interstate conflicts and it will continue within conflicts. Continuing within conflicts, underdevelopment will remain and eventually swell their hegemonic power. Coming into an end with findings, a question surfaced out. What would be the logic behind the United States defense strategy? As you all know, national interest is the most logical standpoint for a superpower. Equally so for non-superpowers. Within democracy and human rights that US forced around the world is a contradiction of their own values. The cartoon on the left has illustrated the logic behind the US defense strategy is empty. As you can see, the President of the United States is commanding war for Afghanistan and looking out for a logic. At the same time, the researcher has the question, what is the logic behind US wanting to continue their intervention when they themselves see no justifiable reason for it? This research is continuing to find out more. The interest you show is really encouraging. Thank you very much.